Welcome back to Preparing for the Unexpected. Today we're talking with Duncan Koerber, the author of Crisis in a Tweet. Duncan, great first segment there. I said at the end I had a question for you, and I was wondering about sometimes people post something, and then these groups that you identify, whether it be activist groups or religious groups or whatever the case may be, read things into tweets that really weren't there, that people never even thought of when they posted it. Is that where some of these crises come from? That just different, people taking things completely out of context.
Yeah, I mean, they happen all the time. This is kind of a subset of these kind of social media crises, typically regular people. So typically crises in the past were crises for companies, organizations, famous people, that kind of a thing. Nowadays, it's been democratized crises. So anybody can face a crisis, like anybody, any of your listeners who are watching this, posting online, they could innocuously post something and fall into a crisis. And a good example in the book is I talk about Natasha Tynes, who was an author who posted a complaint. So people complain a lot on social media, just about everything that happens in their day. And she was on public transit. And you're not supposed to on public transit eat food, typically, like you're not supposed to eat a meal on public transit. And people will often post pictures of that and other behaviors that people do on on these trains. And they'll post it to social media. And she posted this and she kind of was, part of and kind of imagine you're an imaginary group online where you believe in transit etiquette. A lot of people are like that, right? Like they're online, they believe that on transit you should keep the noise down off your headphones, your speakers, and not eat, and there's other behaviors. And so she kind of saw herself as policing that behavior on social media. And she posted a picture of the person and put a hashtag something like transit etiquette and she was expecting that people that she follows and friends and things like that who agree with kind of this transit etiquette rule would like it and agree with it, and maybe the transit authority would would agree with this, like it, retweet it, that kind of thing. But it didn't go that way for her. Uh, a lot of people in different groups, maybe not in the world she inhabits, in these kind of imaginary groups on social media, they complained about her posting the picture because the person that was eating was black, a black woman. And they said that her post was racist. And we know social media is often a place to call out racism. And so there are certain groups of people online. And in this case, this group of people retweeted this complaint about her, complained about a complaint to her publisher. She was actually an author and she was having a book coming out. And they complained to the publisher, said, you have a racist here. And it just went viral. And she had her book contract canceled for that tweet. Now, looking at it rationally, looking at it honestly, her tweet was just a post complaining about someone doing something against the rules on transit. But it fell into this world that she didn't realize that these groups online that were kind of policing, surveilling social media, looking for people that say something that goes beyond some sort of boundary of meaning. And that's what I talk a lot about in the book, these kind of boundaries. But she wasn't a part of that group. She wasn't thinking that that would be something to be, concerned about. And it just blew up. And so there's a lot of cases like that in the book of people who say something. And I look at these tweets objectively, and I'm kind of like, this is way too much criticism for the tweet itself. It didn't deserve that kind of treatment, and she didn't deserve losing the book contract and that kind of thing.
So it's really easy for these tweets or Facebook postings or Instagram, whatever platform you're using, to really just, like your book says, create an absolute crisis that impact people when it's something very, very simple. Like it's like
Yeah.
making a mountain out of a molehill.
Yeah. Well, that's why the book is called Crisis in a Tweet, right? It's the that idea that it's a I'm trying to show throughout the book that we need to see these not as crises almost. I almost want people to see these. I talk in the book, it was hard to write in the book because people do see these as significant things, and PR professionals and famous people who are posting online, and even everyday people kind of have to keep that in mind. But on the other hand, I hope the book will kind of bring things down a bit, so give some perspective, so people maybe the next time they see somebody posting, they don't jump in and join the mob of criticism to hurt these individuals. There's a number of individuals, just not famous people, just regular everyday people in the book who face these kind of situations and lost jobs, lost reputations, faced shaming, and some of them were unemployed for a while because of these situations. And so the grand scheme of things, we need to look at this. These aren't the crises of the past. These aren't the situations that naturally we get the crisis team out. We get everybody involved in these situations because they are really serious physical, material situations. But the book does kind of show how these things have blown up into almost equivalent to the situations that we typically deal with in crisis management or crisis communication.
I can't help but think that that same tweet the author posted, if it was just a comment on X or whatever, and no picture versus putting a picture, would the same response have occurred? Is it because there's a visual aspect quite often
Yeah,
now?
yeah, the visual aspect, the algorithms are circulating things that typically have images that attracts people to tweets. So the algorithms on these sites share things. If you just post text, you're less likely to be shared. If you post video, if you post image, you're more likely to be shared. And if something gets a lot of likes quickly, the algorithm then spreads it, right,
Right.
to as many people as possible. So yeah, definitely putting images like that. There's a story, a case in the book about American Apparel that on the July 4th celebrations, there's fireworks and people celebrate in the United States, the Independence Day. They posted a celebratory tweet, like what's wrong with posting a celebratory tweet? But the person who was running the social media account looking for a photo to attach to it went to, like everybody does, you go to Google Image, you look for a photo, and they posted this photo of a kind of explosion. And it turned out it was the Challenger explosion, the space shuttle explosion photo from many years ago. And they just attached it to the celebratory July 4th tweet. And American Apparel had a huge crisis on their hands of complaints. Now, we call this a faux pas. It wasn't intentional. Whoever did it didn't mean to put that up there, but they just didn't check the photo to see what it was. And you can see how that's just an honest mistake. It's somebody, running a social media account that did that. But it was a big deal that they had to spend some time dealing with that, apologizing for it. Another kind of innocuous situation, not what you would think would cause a crisis.
Now, let's change gears a little bit because there's something I want to ask you about.
Yeah.
We've all heard of crises and polycrises now. We hear that every day, but you referenced something called paracrisis. What
Yeah.
is that?
So, in the field of research into crisis communication and crisis management, when I started looking into social media crises, over 10 years ago, there was a term, and it was called the paracrisis. And I had to understand what that meant. Many people had different definitions of it. And that was kind of a way to unlock my idea of what a social media crisis was. And so the simple definition of a paracrisis is a risk online. So somebody has posted something. It hasn't blown up yet, but it is a risk for typically an organization. I mean, much of crisis communication is about organizational communication. And so sometimes like the American Apparel example, when that was posted, it wasn't a crisis in the second it was posted. Maybe it wasn't even a crisis for an hour after it was posted, but it was a paracrisis. We can say there's this little window where you've put some content out into the world and potentially it could blow up, right? The crisis could happen. That's kind of the paracrisis window. And so PR practitioners are taught that you need to be on the ball, you need to be watching all that content, and you can often deal with that in the short term. In the book, I talk about, for example, the ant of a child who was in a wheelchair, and his wheelchair was broken by Air Canada. And she posted to Twitter about this because they weren't going to fix it right away. They said, "Well, we can fix it in a few days," and the kid needs his wheelchair right away. So what did she do? She went to Twitter and complained about this. She wasn't demanding anything. She was just complaining about Air Canada, and that has a short window called the paracrisis window where it could have been dealt with, right? That Air Canada, having noticed it, if they had noticed it quickly, they could have, somebody higher up, not just in the airport, but somebody higher up could have, called in and dealt with that, said, we're going to get this fixed immediately. We're gonna, and then maybe she would have deleted her tweet, right? Maybe the aunt would have
Sure.
deleted the tweet and that kind of thing. And so the paracrisis window is where you can deal with these situations. But in my book, I talk about when does it go over the tipping point into a social media crisis? So paracrises are not social media crises. They're the road to them in a sense. They're risks that could turn into that. In the book, I talk about what's required and there's so many factors that blow it up, turn it from a paracrisis to a social media crisis. And we've talked about a few of those, but not dealing with it quickly is one of those elements that will kind of contribute to the chance that it'll turn into a social media crisis.
And I guess that window of paracrisis varies until somebody says something or
Yeah,
chimes in and escalates it to a wider
multiple
audience.
people. In the book, I talk about, multiple people, the algorithm spreading it. If multiple people are seeing that and liking it, then the algorithm realizes that this is important to people. In the book, I also have a whole chapter on bots. So there's these little computer programs that are automated on social media accounts, and they will often circulate. So it's not just humans that will circulate complaints and these kind of things. It's often bots that'll make it seem bigger than it is. And I talk about that in the book as well. So that can make it look even worse than it is. Suddenly you see there's, you know, 1,000 retweets on her complaint about Titus's wheelchair. That was the name of the boy. And you think, wow, 1,000 people think this is awful, right? And that drives the algorithm. It might be 10 people that retweeted it, not 1,000. There might be, all these bots that are retweeting it, and that is something I talk about in the book. But then it gets into the cycle where then it gets spread more and more. Then journalists start to notice because a lot of journalists nowadays are dependent on social media for story ideas. And so journalists then write a story about it. That story goes on their sites, and then that gets shared within this cycle that gets shared online, and then more people learn about it. It just blows up into this kind of massive social media crisis that these companies have to deal with.
And I guess the problem with that is too that some of these quote unquote journalists are really just social media influencers who
Yeah.
pass themselves off as journalists, but they're still passing this information on, whether it be correct or not.
And that's a good point. In the book, I do talk about people who have an agenda often with that organization on another point, not on this specific crisis that they're facing online, but something else they don't like about that organization. And so they can actually create kind of a secondary crisis online where they use all that negativity to illuminate something else about that organization that they don't like. So you're getting hit, the organization would be getting hit on kind of multiple points, multiple things, not just this one crisis that first blew up. It's kind of like it ties into a bunch of other things that are complaints that other people have.
And on that note, we've come to the end of our second segment. We are talking today with Duncan Koerber, author of Crisis in a Tweet, and we will be right back.